Yes. All set? You want to turn your tape on?
Yep. It's working, so I gotta stop cursing.
All set? All set. Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to the Town of Nantucket Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, April 1st. This meeting is called to order. Is there any public comment that before us that is on any items that are not on our agenda today? Yes, ma'am, in the back. If you just come up to the microphone and just say who you are, that'd be great.
I'm Catherine Flanagan Stover,
Thank you.
Private citizen, and I put forth Articles 105 and 106 to be able to cite a funeral home and a crematory on Nantucket. And I wasn't very clear about my intent, and I think some of you may have been under the impression that it was an all-or-nothing thing for either piece of property. In other words, it would be a funeral home and crematory on Sparks Ave, or a funeral home and crematory at Shadbush Road. My preference was to have the funeral home on Sparks Ave because that's a fairly residential but also commercial area with the auto body next door, Sea Grill across the street, Stop and Shop across the street. And the crematory in Massachusetts has to be attached to a cemetery. And so I had the home rule constructed so that we could site it somewhere else. It did not have to be attached to a cemetery. All our cemeteries, we believe, are in residential areas, and we thought a crematory should be in the industrial zone. So the planning board also feels that that's appropriate, and Andrew Vorse suggested that that piece of property would be perfect for a crematory. So that's why I have the two pieces of property, and I had the funeral home plan for Sparks Ave, crematory for Shadbush Road. So I was wondering if you would reconsider your motion on that, and I understand it can't be done today. It has to be on the agenda for April 6th. But I would appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yep, Christie.
Catherine, is it normal for a crematorium to be adjacent to a funeral home?
No,
Okay.
not at all. No, it's supposed to be attached to a cemetery in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But I asked that in the home rule that we be able to site it wherever we want. So basically, it would make sense to put it way out of town in the industrial area of the island.
Did you say that the crematorium needs to be adjacent to a cemetery?
Oh, no.
Oh, I thought
Well,
that's-
it doesn't matter everywhere else. It doesn't here.
Okay, it doesn't here.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay. Further questions? I have one. And again, I'm speaking for the committee, so if I'm wrong, raise your hand. When these articles were voted on, it was with the intention that we thought both funeral home and a crematorium would be together. Is that not a possibility, or that's not what you just
It's
recommend?
not. Considering people's sensibilities, I don't think that would be appropriate.
Would not?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
if the people want it that way, I
Well,
guess
no,
they could,
just,
but-
again, I'm more for my education on because this committee, just by, I like to, not believe, but we do support your endeavor with funeral home, and that's by our actions on 106. On 105, it was just a little bit, there was concern about the location being residential. So, which goes back to my earlier question, is that having them together versus separated, would that, if that were to be the case, if with the way the articles are written now go through town meeting, would you be able to make do with that?
Yeah, if they could be separated, that'd be fine.
No, but if they were together, I mean, is that an option? Is not to have them together? I just want to be clear.
I don't think the funeral home out in the industrial area is appropriate. I mean, it's I suppose some people might. They don't want to look at it at all. Personally, I think it would not be appropriate.
Okay.
It would be like putting a hospital out there or something. It's just, doesn't give you a nice warm and fuzzy feeling. Not that funeral homes do, but I think it's more appropriate for the funeral home to be in town and the crematory out of town.
Okay. All right, that, I think, answers my question. Any other questions for anyone? Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 6th before town meeting. I'm more than happy to put this article on for potential reconsideration. So we can take it from there. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, thank you. Any other public comment then that comes before us that is not on our agenda today? And before we get any farther, I was remiss in not introducing everyone, especially on the cameras. On my right, or the left on your TV screen, is Christy Kickham, John Tiffany, Cliff Williams, Stephen Morey, Craig Sperry, Joe Grouse, and Jim Kelly, and David Sperry. And David Worth is not with us today. Okay, so moving on to approval of minutes. There are some minutes in our packets here. I hope everyone had a chance to look at them. Any questions or comments on the minutes in our packet today? Craig?
Make a motion to approve all.
That'd be fine. I was, thank you. Took the thought of it. So we have a motion to approve all. Great, okay. And discussion on the motion to approve all the minutes for March 3rd, March 5th, and March 9th, and March 10th. Hearing none, okay. All's in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next is committee reports, and the only report that I have is the audit committee. Next meeting will be meeting April 22nd. I'm looking at you, Brian. That's correct. April 22nd. They will actually, auditors will actually be here and make a presentation to the board. So that's the next meeting for that. Any other committee reports? Okay. All right. And moving along is the next is discussion of possible reconsideration of Finance Committee motion for Article 3 for the 2015 annual town meeting. As you may recall, at our last meeting on March 10th, the committee went ahead with a comment as printed in the warrant, and at that time there were some questions about financial impact, for lack of a better term, for this article, and some questions were made, and I reached out to the Richmond Corporation with these questions, and their response came as the information that's in the packet before you, along with a answer from one of our own members, Mr. Worth, on that information. So what I would like to do is, Ms. Raghaveen is here, and I think Mr. I'm sorry, I'm saying Arminetti. Thank you very much. And Mr. Arminetti from the Richmond Group, if you'd like to say a few words, the floor is yours. You please come on up to the microphone, and again, thank you very much for compiling this information. It was helpful. And anything to help us understand your intentions would go a long way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, committee members, my name is Dave Arminetti. I'm Director of Real Estate Development for the Richmond Company and Richmond Great Point Development. Speaking on this matter, we have another brief handout that's 6 or 7 sheets with a couple of slides, some of which is referenced in the larger report, and there's about another 10 or so copies of that on the back table. For members of the public, if I could perhaps pass this out.
Great, please. Thank you very much, and we'll enter that in the record also. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. The committee has the full report, which I believe everyone's had a chance to review. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to submit the information at this level of detail, which we feel is quite substantial. There's been a bit of back and forth about whether it's appropriate to submit this level of detail at this point or not. We're certainly more than happy to submit it as soon as we can, and once we have the time to assemble some of this in the context of the current town meeting schedule, we were glad to submit it. Perhaps it will set a standard and a template for moving forward, and if that's the case, we're happy to set that standard. The report itself tries to explain the impacts potentially on municipal revenue and municipal finance if the zoning change were to go through and if the development as contemplated were to be fully developed over a period of time, which we would foresee a 4 to 5 year period to permit it, construct it, and then sell and build all the lots and the houses, which would be a total of 50 on our property and then 7 additional houses that are being owned and developed by the adjacent Housing Nantucket nonprofit that we've done a land exchange with. So we're really focused on our property, which is the 50 houses on approximately 15 acres, and that's what's contemplated. We tried to project revenues, which are mainly comprised of real estate tax revenue, personal property tax revenue, and motor vehicle excise tax revenue in the residential context. And then we tried to estimate primary municipal services being school, public school services, fire services, and police services. And those are all summarized in a series of about a dozen tables and exhibits in the report, which I think are fairly self-explanatory, but we're more than happy to go into as much detail as necessary. Basically, what it shows is that full build-out under what we believe and continue to believe are very conservative assumptions, industry standard assumptions, and then assumptions that have been calibrated specifically to the town with conversations with the assessor, with the tax collector, with the fire chief, the police chief. The last two have been brief conversations about the cost side. We feel we have a really good handle on this, particularly at this preliminary stage in the process. And what the report shows is, under these normal conditions with conservative assumptions in favor of the town, not in favor of the developer, that the project will generate an annual recurring surplus to the town of somewhere in the vicinity of $25,000 from these revenues compared to the costs that we would incur. That's on kind of an operating everyday basis over a period of years from when it's fully stabilized, essentially indefinitely as it's operating. We didn't get into the detail of how much real estate taxes would appreciate over time versus the rate of inflation for costs. We kind of started as a fixed point today and established that snapshot. There are also one-time costs that are fairly significant that would accrue to the town, primarily arranged at building permit fees, which would be about $80,000, sewer fees being the sewer capacity utilization fee, the sewer privilege fee, and the sewer connection fee, which would be in excess of $800,000, and then land bank fees, which would be approximately $420,000 to $490,000, depending on how many of the buyers took advantage of the first-time home buyer exemption that's available to them for land bank transactions. So all in all, I think it presents a very favorable picture, very credible picture, very credible assumptions. We'd be glad to get into detail. There's a lot of methodology and a lot of formulas that go into these reports. There's no real magic to it all. A lot of it is commonsensical and based on numbers that are available to anyone in the municipal budget. There are some assumptions that are industry standard that if you haven't read these reports before, you might not be familiar with, but I think people will get a pretty good intuitive sense of what it's all about. So we think it paints a very accurate picture and a favorable picture, and we're willing to answer any further questions, including some questions that may have been raised already in the review by other members.
Okay, thank you. I'll open
Thank
the
you.
questions. Thank you very much. I'll open up the questions from members of the committee. John?
Did you run your numbers by the chief financial officer of the town?
We haven't had an opportunity to do that yet. We'd be glad to do that. We were really kind of asked to present this in an organized way late last week, Thursday afternoon, I believe. So we spent the better part of the weekend and a couple of days this week putting it together. We have had some conversations with different town officials to confirm some of these assumptions, but we'd be glad to spend some time now walking them through it and making sure that they believe they're credible, conservative assumptions.
Jim?
I'm just trying to understand, so we're having a conversation just to gain some more information?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
At the last meeting, there were questions that were brought up.
Right.
And so that's the intention, just to get
Okay.
more informed
All right.
and to go from there.
So my comment was, I appreciate everybody's under a really tight time frame, and I didn't get a chance to, there's a lot of information
There was
here.
a lot, yes.
And there's a lot of back and forth. I guess I did, I know, I won't comment on the tone of some of the correspondence, but for me, it needs, I'd like to have the opportunity to review it and consider it more. I'd also like to get a chance to, I called David Worth today, but I guess he's in an airplane someplace, and I would also like the chance to kind of hear, his response, because I thought he was very thoughtful in his analysis.
And again, just for everyone's information, a member of our committee, Mr. Worth, who's not here, did make some critiques on the proposal that is in the packet, and you've all received a copy. So, Okay.
Yeah,
Ms.
I
Roggeman,
just wanted
thank
to
you.
add to John's question. We did contact the school department, and the data that we received on school enrollment is from the superintendent's own report and the like, so that material was a direct, obviously the school costs are significant, and we wanted to make sure we had that data solid.
Yeah, maybe I should clarify further. In most of the tables or the exhibits in the report, there are citations from the different departments if we did get directly sourced information.
Okay. Thank you. Joe?
Just wondering if you could touch, Dave, on the, some of the infrastructure that, as you build out this development, that could accrue benefit to the town, like,
Sure.
roads, streets, sewer, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we've made it clear in the discussion process through all of this and leading up to town meeting, this entire development will be self-funded by us as the private developer. We're not looking to any public funds, whether they be grants or loans or CPC or CPA funds, nothing like that. It'll all be self-funded through development. They will mainly be comprised of sewer infrastructure, which will be brand-new sewer, servicing the entire 60-plus acres that we own, including this 15-acre portion. Most of that will tie in directly to the South Valley pumping station within Naushop. We've had ongoing discussions with the DPW for about the last 6 or 8 months as to what the scope of those improvements would be. They have fully approved all that, and we're actually about to start on the first phase of the sewer installation April 13th in Gregland Avenue. There'll be a first phase that's about $150,000. That'll be followed up by contributions to upgrade the pumping station that are approximately $250,000 right now. The pumping station itself is in very good shape, has plenty of excess capacity. It just has some antiquated electronics and controls, and it has a generator that is not compliant with current federal EPA rules and regulations, Tier 4 regulations they're called, for those of you listening at home. And our contribution to that voluntarily through negotiation with the DPW is to contribute the full cost of that, which will benefit the entirety of the 150 acres around us that contributes sewage flow into that pumping station, in addition to building out all the mains and manholes on our own property. Similarly, we'll be constructing a full water network with potable and fire service. We'll be building out, in this phase of the 15 acres, about 2/3 of a mile of new roadways to town specifications, which will all be built, maintained privately, but to town specifications. We're not looking for the town to take over the maintenance or control of any of those roads, and those will all have specified street trees, landscaping, street lighting, everything to the town specifications and the subdivision rules and regulations. In terms of traffic infrastructure, in addition to building out the road network, we are fully prepared once we have zoning in place and we're able to do a full comprehensive traffic study at the planning board level to fully mitigate any of the traffic impacts of this phase of development and the entire development, whether that be turning lanes, additional roundabouts, additional access points. All of that will be self-funded as well, and I'm sure that will be a healthy discussion at the public level, the town level, and that mitigation will be significant. And we know full well, even if we're able to be successful at town meeting and get the zoning, if the planning board in their studies determines that the development can't be supported by the infrastructure, we're not going to get approvals. That's the process, and we fully understand that, and that's a risk we're fully willing to take. In terms of making a commitment to ensure that the town has no risk in that, in terms of us fully funding everything, oftentimes we enter into development agreements with towns that specify that from a contractual basis. We're doing that in the case of the sewer infrastructure with the DPW. It's actually in the form of a gift letter in this case, but it's basically a contract between us and the town that says, in order to be able to put our sewage into the system, we will contribute the following amount on the following schedule. And I would foresee that we would do that with the planning board for all the other infrastructure. And that almost unilaterally, no matter what jurisdiction you're working in. I mean, I've worked on projects of this scale and different and larger, from California to Long Island to Massachusetts. They're almost always done at the planning board level when you get your special permit or your site plan approval with the planning board, and we're looking forward to that process. If the Finance Committee or the Board of Selectmen needs some prior reassurance about that in a more general way in writing from us, we've said on the record before that we're glad to provide that, and we'd be more than willing to provide that even between now and Monday if that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
Just a comment and a question. So we've heard from, folks who live in that area that one of their concerns is that this is not a piecemeal. This is the first of other components of other projects, and that's totally understandable. They're looking for the big picture. We've all talked about the fact that in order to accomplish this, you're going to need to create some capacity in the pump station. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us what the components are in terms of users of that?
Sure, we can get into that in a little detail. The entirety of the property we own out there is still about 65 acres. We've sold off a handful of houses to local home buyers, but we basically still own about 65 acres. Long term, depending on exactly where the zoning and the planning goes, if you look back at the Noshop Crossing Area Plan, which was adopted last year by the Planning and Economic Development Commission and acknowledged by the Planning Board, we basically have a mix of some residential zoning on the airport side of my property and on the Woodland Drive, Skyline Drive portion of the property. Then we have kind of a commercial light industrial core, which is basically where you see the existing warehouse buildings today, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Sales Seafood, which we don't own, they own that property, but those type businesses are in the kind of center core, 5 acres. Then we have a portion of land that's zoned commercial neighborhood, which is more up along the area of Gregland Avenue and Old South Road, where you currently see the Old South Diner, the market, those smaller buildings, liner retail buildings as they're called, out on the Old South Road frontage. That area will likely evolve over time into an integrated retail and services area of 10 or 12 acres. We're still hoping to get an anchor tenant for that area in conjunction with the work we're doing with the Valeros on the north side of Old South Road. And hopefully we'll have some better detailed news to provide the community on that in the next 3 to 4 months. But that will probably take a retail, neighborhood, local character with some smaller buildings in the 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range, and then hopefully one anchor tenant that will get the support of the community and that we'll be able to develop. And then off to the west, there's just a small sliver of residential land along Gregland Avenue that is going to be utilized for a combination of some apartments. We have an area there that's almost 2 acres that was rezoned at last town meeting in 2014 for a 24-unit apartment community, which we're hoping to get started on this summer. And then there's a handful of R10 zoned residential lots down there that are being developed for family duplex housing. There's 4 of them. It could be a total of 8 units. So really the zoning is set, and we don't foresee that changing anymore. This would probably be the last significant zoning change that we'll pursue, other than hopefully releasing the 20,000 square foot retail building cap if we have a retail anchor tenant that we think is appropriate and the community will support. But that land is already zoned for retail use. It's just not zoned for larger retail use. So we don't think anything radically changing. The one area that is a bit of a wild card is the asphalt plant gravel pit. It's a little undefined today. Obviously, we're trying our best to clean that up, along with Mr. Glowacki's help over the next remaining year and a half that he has contractually to do that. And then we're going to still take a kind of wide look at that 20 or so acres and figure out what that should be. It's zone CN. It could be a variety of commercial, retail, residential type uses. As the committee's probably aware, CN allows apartments. There's a great demand in the community for apartments of all different varieties of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, different income levels. There could be some additional residential there. So it's maybe not as much of a mystery as it might appear once you actually look at a plan and start to hear how the pieces relate together. And I think from an infrastructure standpoint, one of the main benefits of us having this much land and so many different land uses is it really can blend well together if we do it appropriately, where the peaks of traffic can offset each other. If we have a mix of residential, retail, commercial, industrial use, you won't have them all peaking at the same time in terms of traffic use. They'll blend together a little better. And then even in terms of infrastructure use, those uses don't demand the same types of infrastructure in terms of sewer and water, and they also blend together pretty well. So from a master planning standpoint, it really will start to round into shape. And, we're more than happy at the different stages to provide as much detail as we can, and that's our intent. We've tried to be as forthcoming as we can be in the first 18 months of our tenure of ownership out here, and that's our philosophical commitment to the town, and we're going to continue to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Rodway?
Sorry, Dave.
Yep.
I'm going to thank you again for maybe a little tag team. One of the other obligations that we've already undertaken too, and I think, Jim, this might speak a little bit more to your question. In the case of the pump station in particular, we were approached by Noshop. Obviously, the neighborhood is wondering what, we have had discussions with the town, and their comfort level may have not been quite as high as it needed to be, and we've already retained and had work on an evaluation of that pump station by an independent contractor, which we've paid, for as a company, and that report's coming back any day now, if not momentarily. So again, in the case where we are now outreaching to our neighbors, whether they be Noshop or anyone else in the Cedar Crest or Daffodil area, we are more than willing to take on the obligations and responsibility of bringing up the comfort level, whether it be on with respect to that pump station or anything else that we need to investigate.
Okay. Thank you. John, you have a question?
I'm going to loop back to something you said. I'm a little slow, so you've got to kind of...
You're faster than me, I'm sure.
I think as I heard you right, your expectation is that the town will not own the roads, sidewalks, streetlights, storm drains, sewers. Is that correct?
Correct. That would all be publicly funded up front in terms of construction and installation and in terms of long-term maintenance. What will likely happen in the residential areas is it will be taken over by our private homeowners association, and then all that long-term maintenance and capital improvements will be funded that way. In the commercial properties, it'll be funded by whatever of our entities owns the commercial properties.
Okay, so you're expecting a homeowners association to be responsible for the maintenance of those items?
Correct. As is the case customarily virtually everywhere else on the island.
Yeah, we've had some problems with that here and there, and so that's something that needs to be done carefully, I think, so that the homeowners going in know that that's an issue,
Yeah, and in this case, I think we have an extra level of comfort that we'll be doing the upfront construction, and it will be all new code-compliant construction. The issues we've had out there up to now have been more related to the fact that some of the stuff that's been put in originally wasn't really up to snuff, and that problem will be solved as well going forward.
Okay.
But yeah, we have no expectation to get funding, ownership, or control from the town.
And I just want to add again, we have taken the obligation seriously in the sense of we do have property still in the Daffodil and Evergreen. That homeowners association was not established. It had been, I guess Walter Wacky was the sole trustee and had really never gotten off the ground. Last summer we made a major effort to get those organizations off the ground, and what you see now responding to our project are the folks that we helped get organized. We still have those properties available on those lots, and we've given our dues for the homeowners association for those for that subdivision. And again, I myself, my own personal residence, I think we as a company are fully committed to that as the organizational engine for any of these improvements and for the neighborhood.
Cliff.
Might be trivial, but on page 14, it says the sewer privilege fee is $6,300. I thought it was $8,500. I don't know.
That's what the DPW gave us. Yeah. So the total per unit is going to be $15,000 for the total sewer connection, utilization, and privilege fee. It may differ in other areas of the island. I'm not sure, but that's the citation we got from the DPW. I can check back on that, but
that number is correct.
63.
Yeah.
All right. Somebody owes me money.
You bet. Further questions or comments? Oh, John.
You mentioned something about traffic mitigation on Old South Road. Could you expand on that, on what your corporation is willing, I mean, that can be as big as a box or as big as a room.
Sure.
So I'm trying to get a feeling of what kind of commitment are you prepared to make in that area?
Well, I guess the simplest answer is whatever it takes, and that is the truthful answer. Really, there's a relationship between what we would be able to obtain for approvals that won't overly impact the community and what will have to be installed. So the biggest variable there that we need to have some more certainty on before we can go forward and do a full traffic study is, one, for the zoning to settle in a little bit, and this question, one way or the other, will have a big impact on that. Two would be the larger retail use. Once that settles in, hopefully in the next couple months, and we know whether or not we're going to have a certain anchor retail user on one side of the road or the other, then we'll be able to do a very detailed traffic study that will really be able to quantify the mitigation that's necessary. What we've done thus far to date with a licensed traffic engineer that's done a fair amount of work on the island is we've estimated some, I would say, moderately aggressive total build-out numbers based on a variety of land uses that might go there. The ones that we know definitively, and some of the ones that may vary a little bit, as I mentioned, for the asphalt plant gravel pit property. What we have been able to satisfy ourselves is that under total daily trip conditions and peak conditions with those mix of land uses, there is capacity along the right-of-way that we have on Old South Road to make the levels of service, the day-to-day traffic flow, better from what it is today. We did a whole comprehensive system of counts last summer during peak traffic periods that was done in conjunction with a scope of work that was approved by the Planning and Land Use Department and by Mike Burns, the transportation planner. So we have all that data, fresh data, right in the can that we've been able to use, and we used industry standard traffic generation rates for all that traffic. So we know essentially no matter what happens, we can mitigate it. It's just a question of, as you basically said, how big is that mitigation box going to be? I can tell you from prior experience and just from knowing what's going on out there, it's going to be a seven-figure mitigation number. It's not going to be $100,000 or a couple $100,000. It's going to be in the $1 million plus range. And it may constitute some widening, some different driveway cuts. It may constitute things as sophisticated as additional traffic circle, roundabout. We know it's not going to be a traffic light, even though I'm from America and from the other side. I know that's not going to happen, and that's not appropriate. So I can assure you of that. We have no intention of going down that road, no pun intended. But as soon as we have those kind of next two key questions answered, we'll be able to supply a study to the community that's probably going to be about that thick, that studies all this stuff in great detail and tells you what should come out the other end to make it better. The only point that I will make a point about, and that Patty's been very good about articulating, is if we fix everything on our end of Old South Road, there still has to be a bunch of stuff fixed further to the west for it all to work together. And we know the town has great plans in place for additional improvements at Fairgrounds and at the Milestone traffic circle, and all that will have to work in conjunction. Because it won't help if you can get through our property and the Valero property and you still can't get past Milestone. So all that will work in conjunction. I'm certainly not going to stand here and say that I can tell you every exact answer today, because we still have some land uses and densities and mixes that we have to work out, but we are very confident we're going to be able to mitigate it so that when we're standing here, when it's all built, that the traffic's actually working better than it is today, not worse, even with all the development.
Just to follow, and I caught you. I caught that the first time when you said better, because so your expectation is that you can, when you get it all said and done, that you can actually have a better situation once it's built out than we have now.
Yep, absolutely. The traffic will actually flow better from a technical and a statistical standpoint, and from when you're sitting in your car, you'll be able to get up and down Old South Road in the vicinity of our property better than you can today. And if the traffic study shows that we can't, and we have to scale back on the development in terms of either uses or density or square footage, we'll do that. And not only will we do that, the planning board and the community will demand that we do that. And we're willing to take that risk and to take on that obligation as well.
And again, I'm going to sound like I'm either repetitive or at least saying what's obvious, but when you're dealing with a project like ours in terms of an entire 65 acres, the options available to us on property that we currently own, and we don't have to go anywhere else, are actually quite numerous. And so when we look at issues and challenges like traffic, we know we can go in a number of different directions without having to do much more than ask ourselves if we can do it. And that, I think, is one of the key pieces that most developers that might be doing, say, a small subdivision or retail space, they don't have that luxury. And ultimately, we'll be working closely with the town, as we have with some of the other infrastructure issues, to sort of ascertain what works best for the town as an entirety. So, I do want to emphasize that, it is going to be, as Dave said, more than a Band-Aid. We fully intend, because for our own good, we'd like what we're putting together to work and to flow. And at the same time, we're going to have a lot of flexibility with respect to, options.
Cliff?
Just to try to maybe echo what Patty said, I would like to think, because there's been back and forth discussion, this plan seems to be less of an impact compared to what you could do legally with your property. just to make that point, right? I mean, this is...
With respect to the 15 acres that's the subject
all
of the
the
zoning code, or all of
property,
it?
I mean,
Sure.
If you could put in a 40B and put in 300 houses versus 57 and things like that, I'm just trying to... A lot of people look at the, I guess it's 57 houses, and I look at it as it could be 300 houses. I'm not sure, but this seems to be a less of an impact to the infrastructure in the town with 57.
Yeah, and we think the way we've gone through the planning, both with the planning department, the planning board, and with the neighbors who have made a great contribution to this, and that shouldn't go without saying, that we've had a very good back and forth with them, particularly the Cedar Crest neighbors, and they've worked hard with us to refine the plan to where I think it really does blend in well with the neighborhood from an overall density standpoint. One of the graphics in your package shows something that seems probably counterintuitive, but is factually correct, which is the 16-acre Cedar Crest 3 neighborhood that's currently in place that is zoned R20 but is effectively R10 because of all the condominium and cooperative subdivision is actually more dense than what we're proposing on our property. So it's a good point, a point well taken.
Thank you. Christie?
David, if you could point out, if this article goes to town meeting and it's successful, if you could point out or detail the additional steps or processes you have to go through to further, realize the development?
Absolutely. First thing I'll say is Patty's told me that it will go through, not if, so I'll start there. But yeah, this is only the first step in a process, or one of the first few steps in a long process, and I think the planning board and Mr. Vorse have been good at articulating this. There are going to be 4 or 5 other major steps along the way that will all be public. Will include public hearings, will include public review, will also include a lot of community outreach that hopefully we've proven in our first 18 months here that we're more than willing to do proactively, whether that be with the neighbors directly around us or the larger community groups, whether that be the Builders Association or the Rotary or the Chamber of Commerce or all these other critical community groups that we try to reach out with. The first step would be getting zoning past the town meeting if we are fortunate enough to do that. At that point, we try and come up with a more specific subdivision and site plan that would refine what you see in front of you a little bit, although we have a pretty good handle on it at this point. We would then talk some more to the neighbors and to some of these other community groups, and then submit that to the planning board for formal review and hopefully approval. That would be a series of public hearings before the planning board, a series of informal meetings, and then formal meetings that would probably take the better part of 4 to 6 months, I would think, with multiple public hearings. And if we were able to do it, we would concurrently go to the Historic District Commission for architectural review at that time for the templates for the houses that we'd like to construct. If that were successful, we would also get some infrastructure approvals along the way, along with the water department, the fire department, the DPW would approve the rest of the sewer build-out plan. Transportation and planning department would review and approve traffic studies and all the roadway plans, and then we'd move forward to the building department eventually for building permits. So all that would take the better part of at least 8 or 9 months, if not a year, and again, would be multiple steps along the way with multiple public hearings and a considerable amount of public process, all to get to the end, which is the most appropriate, best project for the island that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Greg?
Hi, Dave. Thanks for providing this information.
Oh, absolutely. We're glad to.
It's helpful. You had a chart where you showed if the proposed zoning did go through, that at the high range of 50% new residents, that there would be a total of 21 new students in the school system.
Yep.
One of the points you made, too, is that these houses that are being built, a lot of the people that move into them are already here. So these are island families that now move into these units and then have students that go to the school. And David Worth brought this point up, too, and it's a concern of mine, is that you now have island families moving into these new houses. Well, the places they moved out of, people are going to move
Someone's
in there.
going to move in there,
and
yep.
students also. So although it says 21 students, that number is actually higher if you added in who's moving into these vacant units now and how many kids do they have, how many are going to the school.
Yeah, we're not trying to essentially double count or undercount that. Certainly there'll be a cycle as people move from other locations on the island out of housing units. They will then be backfilled with new residents that may well have school-age children in the system. I guess the main point there is by our new housing, we're creating a new vehicle to create more real estate taxes to pay those bills, and those houses that are being recycled back into the housing stock are already on the real estate tax rolls, and they're still going to be paying their fair share. So we're adding the revenue, even though the net cost is only going up in our new units. It's not essentially going up in the old units. Those previously occupied units that will be reoccupied will be paying their same fair share all the way along the way. And the data that's come through has been pretty educational to us in terms of just how dependent the island is on residential real estate taxes. I'm sure the board's aware, maybe the public's not aware. Not only does about 90% of the total general revenues in the whole town come from real estate taxes, about 90% of that comes from residential real estate taxes. So whether we like to admit it or not, growth and appreciation in the residential market is really what drives the municipal budget and really is the only significant resource or revenue that can continue to appreciate over time to pay the bills.
Thank you. Patty?
And I just can't go by without saying, and I'm not going to get into a long discussion about the housing needs on the island, but, ultimately we have to be realistic. It's been at least documented through word of mouth, if not, I believe the Community Foundation is doing a study right now on the housing piece, but we all know that, folks, and we know that because we inherited a lot of it when we bought the Walters properties. We all know this situation in which people are currently living, not by choice, but because there's nothing else available. I mean, I know that it's hard to believe, but I've seen it, and I just want to make sure that you understand that we have ourselves those kinds of residents within the property, and as much as you'd like to say we can't have it, there's nowhere else for these folks to go. And we know we've got pages full of people looking for rentals, yes, but in some cases we know from working with our brokers and some of the realtors that there is a target market in this right above covenant pricing that we're trying to at least keep 20-some units available for. And we will also, of course, mix, as every other residential development does, with essentially people that aren't in the schools and not necessarily here year-round. So we've done that balance on purpose and that mix on purpose because we are cognizant and sensitive to the impact that this may or may not have. And I do think that as a model for that kind of balance, while we were protecting and providing a new source of housing that we know we all need, we are also providing a mix so that some of those, let's face it, a 20,000 square foot lot in that area is not going to be $700,000. We all know that, right? And that may not be somebody on the island. So, again, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. We want to talk about targeting an affordable marketplace, and we understand that, but we also know that in terms of this kind of calculation, it's really important for us to mix it. And I think if you look around neighborhoods, the more successful neighborhoods actually do that.
Thank you. Jim?
Just not to belabor the concept of real estate, source of general fund revenue from real estate, but I think, as we all know, 80% of the real estate taxes are paid by non-residents who do not use, for the most part, municipal services like schools. So, and I know in an earlier presentation, the Richmond group said, well, we have by right now the ability to build, $5 million houses, $3 million houses, and from a infrastructure cost, that would actually add less infrastructure cost to the island, because I don't know if, I certainly, I don't know many, there are a lot of island people that could afford that kind of a housing. So that's, so I think we have to be, careful that we're understand the balance.
Mm-hmm. It is. And then I guess to that point, Mr. Kelly, you mentioned the magic word, which is balance, and that's what this article is all about. Balancing the housing need on the island for year-round islanders that can't afford $1 million house, with still putting in 2/3 of the housing in this development will still be R10 lots sized or larger, and by definition, an R10 house in the Cedar Crest neighborhood is $950,000 and up, and the R20 houses are well in excess of $1 million, more in the $1.6 million, $1.8 million range. So that's why we have a mix and a balance. We know we're going to get probably 50% seasonal, at least in those larger lots. So 50% of 2/3 of our development is likely to be seasonal homeowners that have the exact dynamic that Mr. Kelly was talking about. The only ones that won't will be the slightly smaller lots where we're intentionally trying to target to a need that we hear every hour of every day in our job here on the island, which is, I'm in a junky apartment with my family, and I hate it, and I want a better house, and I want a better apartment. And if you guys can provide that in an area where it's the most appropriate, perhaps on the entire island, where we have infrastructure, where we have access to services, I wouldn't be standing here if I was trying to defend a brand-new 50-unit development out in Tom Nevers that's sitting on wells and septic. I wouldn't even be here. I'm here because we have the land that's appropriate and that we can develop a product that's quality, that we can be proud of, that'll be a benefit to the island.
Okay. Jim, I was remiss. Mr. Morey had his hand up before you, so is that,
Let
yeah.
Jim follow up.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I just, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay. That's fine.
I don't think, I'm uncomfortable that we're now into a debate. I thought our process here is that you recognize the speakers, and I'm not sure you recognize that gentleman on his rebuttal when he called me up by name. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So noted. All right. Stephen.
I want to make a general comment that certainly relates to the issue of how many, I don't know if you want to say students will be generated, but how many new children we might have in the school as a result of Article 53. What we should be looking at in terms of school enrollment and all the other costs is the marginal impact that Article 53 is going to have, and not the total number of homes, but the difference between what could be built under current zoning and what might be built under the proposed zoning. And by at least a couple calculations that I've seen, there could be more homes, more dwellings under current zoning through Chapter 40B, or maybe through leaving many of the lots the same size but pursuing duplexes where Richmond has offered to self-restrict, and by allowing second dwellings on, say, the R20 lots, whereas under the proposal they'll be cutting the R20 into two R10 lots, most of which, 70% of which, will be restricted to a single dwelling. So the marginal impact is not much in terms of traffic or students or many of these costs. So I just want to make that point. Looking at the total, I think, is missing the point in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes, Ms. Bargman.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a general statement through Mr. Mulcahy to Jim Kelly, and generally speaking to the board as a whole. I mean, I understand what Jim's saying about the fact that there would be less impact perhaps on school and the like in terms of a build-out that would include lots that were not affordable for island residents. But frankly, I find it really disturbing as an island resident that a direction would be taken that says, we're going to be in the future developing residential areas that are not accessible to our own families because of the fact that they may impact as far as a student is in the school or whatever else the cost is. I do think that given what we're facing as an island, we have to make some hard decisions about balance, as Dave has said, between our own needs as a community and also what we can spend and what we can afford. And I do think we're making that effort, and we're making it strongly, and I'm scared by any kind of suggestion that we may be going forward looking for zero cost, because that's not, to me, the community I'd like to be part of.
Okay. Thank you. I think that, and again, I'm not going to speak for anyone, is this board, as by its charge, is always to look at finances, and it is difficult to draw the fine line and the balance between growth and control of those finances. So and that's where the challenge comes in. So, John.
Yeah, a comment on the last couple of people that have talked. I can only speak for myself, but I'm not here to shoot anything down or to misrepresent anything. I'm just here to get facts. And I think, so I just wanted to make that clear. I think the other question I have, and maybe I should know the answer, but I don't, and that is when I talk about affordable housing, I think of certain aspects on the island that we've worked to get affordable housing. And we've got a big development up on Surfside Road to that extent. I think what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, is housing that falls into a category that is not in the $1 million range, but something less than that, that homeowners, that people who live here can afford. What's the range of that, of those houses that in your mind that you're talking about? What range are we talking about here?
It's a great question, and I think one that would surprise a lot of people, certainly people from off island. And that is, right now, the covenant price is about $675,000. We are trying to reach a market which we know exists from our own discussions with realtors, say from about that point up to about $750,000 in terms of cost. That's not for every property. We're trying very hard to make that happen for the R5 lots. We will be developing those lots ourselves, and we will be providing housings on those lots. And those are the lots that it's like 23 or 24 properties that we would then be putting into the pool. The other properties, the 10,000 square foot lots, the 20,000 square foot lots, we're not making any claim whatsoever in terms of affordability. Again, that's the mitigation that we're trying to address both for the neighborhood and for the cost per to the town and the like. We actually did start out with a lot more R5 lots, to be frank, and we pulled back on that based on the reaction that we received from the community as a whole, both in terms of finances and also in terms of neighborhood. So, ultimately, we are trying to reach a price point, probably profile as two-earner family, couple with children. If you add, I think $139,000 right now is the cutoff on the covenant in terms of income. It's not hard to imagine two earners on this island getting over that, and we know that there's a lot of people in that price point, and there's not anything right now to speak of on the market in that price point. Again, I think the housing issue as a whole is going to require an awful lot of different solutions. We're only one part of that solution. The apartments are a different part of that solution. And ultimately, we are trying to balance that. So the numbers that we're approaching and what we're keeping in terms of our price and the application of that price will be about that, John. So pretty much, I would say upward 600s, low 700s, and we still have every confidence, even with the infrastructure that we will be applying to all of this, that we will hit that number.
Could you repeat that again, the range you're talking about?
Yeah, I would say upper sixes, to about 750 in that pocket. And again, part of the moving target here is just what we'll have to provide to the town, to be frank. I mean, so, we got to be realistic. Depending,
no, I understand.
Yeah,
you're more in the conceptual phase. It's a little hard to pin these things down.
Right. And once we know what we're going to be giving back as a total, we'll have a little different idea of what the price, but that's what we're trying for. And so far, total confidence we'll get there.
Okay. I'm going to call on Craig, and after that, then I'd like to kind of sum up and move along. Okay.
What statement?
Okay, well, he's going to go first.
Thanks. I suppose just more of a comment and to talk about what my colleague, Mr. Kelly, said about seasonal houses. But I think it's important to realize that there are costs involved with the seasonal house. Even though they might not have kids in the school, their landscapers probably do, their plumber, their property managers. So there are additional costs that might have an effect on, even though it's a seasonal house. I think if you dig down deeper, there's other things going on there.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Just a quick response. I mean, I completely understand that perspective. I just had to say this, though. We did have a conversation with public safety, and Mark McDougall said I could use his name, and that he fully anticipates less visits to this property once we've cleaned it up than he's currently had to deal with. So I think, as you know, Jim, Craig, there's lots of dynamics moving here, and I think we are trying to put the pin on the map, and we appreciate the give and take, but ultimately, there's a lot of moving pieces.
Okay. Yes, Christy.
Yeah, just more of a comment. I'll take a chance with a year-round house having an impact on the infrastructure than I will a seasonal house. That's the thing, was we don't need a seasonal house. We don't need any seasonal houses. So that's that. And also, just really quick,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and as far as voting on the zoning issue, I don't think it should come down to how many additional students are going to go to the high school. I think that's just something it's part of the community, and so that's how you go about it. I think it's wrong.
John, you want to make a statement?
I was going to say something else, but Christy just reminded me that we're here to look at the financial impact on the town. And schools have a financial impact on the town and that sort of thing. So for us not to look at that would be crazy, in my mind.
If I may.
So the issue is,
Well, John, finish up, John.
what I was originally going to say is that you had listed a lot of, you had not listed, but you had talked about a lot of infrastructure improvements that have yet to be really designed, but you've been doing some work, but you haven't, the rubber hasn't hit the road. And you mentioned that you would be willing to put something in writing to that purpose, and I personally would like to see something in writing on that.
Okay, thank you. Christie?
I just was going to say, we also make comments and motions to town meeting on articles that don't have an impact to the town. So it goes both ways, John. I agree.
It does. Okay. Before, I would like to open up to the audience for any questions on the financial part of this article, but I would like just to read our comment and just try to get us back to the options before us here. And the Planning Board gave this article a positive recommendation, and then the Finance Committee made this comment. The Finance Committee does not support the Planning Board motion to adopt this article due to the lack of available information about the fiscal impact on town finances at the time this article was reviewed by the Finance Committee. And the reason I read that is that we have received information, and we've had the opportunity to ask questions on that. So I throw this out to you as a committee, is that do we want to stick with this comment, or do we want to reconsider to another comment or to no comment? And just a reminder, this is, I treat this comment just as if we were making a motion, just to keep things on the up and up, so that and be less confusing. So if anyone were to be so inclined to reconsider that, it would have to be an individual that voted for putting this comment in. And then, yes, Joe.
Question, so
Sure.
so we could make a motion to strike that comment?
Yes, we
and
could.
Insert a supportive comment?
We could, that's correct. Or we could just strike this comment and leave it blank, or alter the comment in some way. That's the options before us. So, and I throw that out just to give some thought. But the clear thing is, if we do reconsider this comment, it would take one of the four individuals who voted for this comment. The minority cannot initially make a motion to reconsider. Okay, is that clear?
The minority must vote to reconsider?
No. To accept the motion for reconsideration, it needs to come from one of the four individuals who voted for this comment. Okay? Now, just to give that some thought, and before we get back to that, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments or have any questions? And the only thing I would ask is that we are the Finance Committee, we are not planners, so it would really pertain to just on the financial impacts of this. Okay, hearing none, then we go back before us. We have an article, the Planning Board has a motion, we have a comment. What's the committee's disposition? How does the committee feel about going forward? Jim?
I just, you had a chance to speak to David Worth about the response he
Just
got
the email he sent, the only comment that, no, to answer your question, I just sent his response to everyone and made it part of the packet. So I have not, because he's not here. I did reach out to him, and I didn't hear back. But he's traveling, so I'm not. So, Stephen.
I'll make a motion to reconsider our comment on Article 53.
Okay. So we have a motion to reconsider our comment on Article 53. Is there a second? Anybody can second.
Second.
Second. Okay. So, discussion on the article. I think we all know what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
John.
I'm one of those stupid people who I sat down and went through this once because that's all the time I had, and I went through it very quickly. So what I've got to say is not complete. It's just based on a cursory run through it. I listed the questions I had in the items I had, and many of them, then I got David Worth's write-up, which a lot of the questions that he brought up I had independently listed myself. And I know that maybe I'm not smart enough to understand this type of analysis, but I have some problems with the analysis, and I don't have, it's interesting, I don't have any problems with the development, I just have problems with the analysis. And it's kind of a, and I'd like to know more about it. One of the things that I've asked, and I didn't hear anything, but I've asked for Richmond to send us a listing of, in writing of the infrastructure changes that they anticipate they would be making. That's one of the details that I didn't, till today, I had no idea that any of that was going to be happening. So I'm just saying that my problem today is what it was before, that is I just don't have enough information.
All right, thank you. Jim?
And, you know, if somebody's gone through the whole, like, done a little comparison on all these points, that would, you know, make me feel more comfortable. And I hear John say that he's done most of that or some of that, so that's kind of where I'm, you know, wary, because I know in the comments that were made in the emails.
And which email are you pertaining to, Jim?
There's been so many, I'm trying to figure out which
take your
one.
time.
I think,
Just
okay,
when you know
so this is from Mr. Arminetti.
Okay.
There's it says, there's a long email. It says, well, I think there's some editorial comments that, you know, I don't know how appropriate they are. Under this methodology, this infers that people whose homes are valued at less than $5.1 million on Nantucket should not be allowed to have children in the local school system. But I think to the point, it says, to infer that the total cost of educating the 1,546 students in the NPS school system should be borne only by real estate taxes of the homes with which these students living in them, with all due respect, is ludicrous and almost belies comprehension. So I guess I may be in that category, because I see that although this is fungible, we are going to have incremental students, and I think we should understand the cost of those incremental costs to the system. So.
Thank you. Further comments? Joe?
Sorry. You know, I guess from my perspective, which was my perspective when we had our original vote on this, this project was reviewed and approved by the planning board.
Correct.
Mr. Vorse came before us then and explained his support.
He did.
I think that in general, the Finance Committee has supported the recommendations, as I understand, of the planning board, and certainly has respected the views of the professionals that work for the town. I think that, in the interim, the Richmond Company has responded, I think, very appropriately. I think the back and forth between David and
Mr. Arminetti.
And Mr. Arminetti has been enlightening. I must say, I did not appreciate David's analysis. I don't think it was that accurate, but, he's entitled to his opinions and his assumptions. But having said that, I think this focus on the cost of the school system is getting a little overwrought here on this committee, because, there are hundreds of houses on this island built every year. And I don't see, again, this is my first year on the Finance Committee, but I don't think we review all the houses that are built on the island with their cost impact on the school. So I think we're digging into this a little overly dramatically. Having said that, I think it makes sense for us to review our decision and go back and frankly support the recommendation of the Planning Board and put this on the right course for the town meeting.
Okay. All right. Now, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Maybe we should review them.
That's another discussion. No. That's another discussion.
Could be, but we don't.
Because you cannot expect the planning board
to
do a financial review.
John, that's another discussion, which we will have. That's not, we're getting off the track a little bit. Leave it at that. Any other comments? And then I'll, for my experience, I will not be voting on this because I only have voted to break a tie. But my comments are, is that this is the first time in my 7.5 years in this committee that we have delved into a planning issue to this extent. And it's a good exercise, and one that I've learned from, and I think this committee has learned from. And what I would like to see going forward is that the Finance Committee take a stronger role in an observation of how planning is done, and that more discussion will come on that later. But Joe, I do echo what you say. The planning board they are elected officials. Our planning staff is, by all accounts, the cream of the crop, and I find it very difficult within the laws of the Commonwealth on impact fees that we risk and we run a very delicate tightrope when we make comments. I think the information provided certainly has helped illuminate things that we were not aware of, and going forward gives us a better understanding for when future projects come in. So, yeah. Jim.
One last comment, and
Sure.
I know this sounds like so I think I agree this has been a great conversation. It's almost unfortunate that this, that the Richmond group happened to be the first one that and I think maybe we've, and myself included, have called them out maybe, but I think this has been an excellent exercise. I think it's good to have the give and take. And Mr. Arminetti talked about maybe this will be a standard for other conversations, and I think it could be. And I thank them for their, their openness and their dialogue, and I'd certainly be willing to support this.
Okay. All right. Well, hearing no other comments. Oh, Craig, I'm sorry. Go ahead. This is the last one.
I think just to bring it up, just for perspective, that if this is built out at the proposed zoning, the increase in tax revenue is $159,000, I think $160,000 if the exemptions are taken. When you look at what we pay town employees, that's going to pay for about 2 employees. So to me, it's something to keep in mind. Here we are adding a lot of infrastructure, and what impact does that have on the town? So it's really not a question about Richmond. It's really a question about planning and how we go forward. So what impact that might have.
Stephen?
I just want to reiterate the point I made earlier, that this Article 53, or any zoning article, is not about what could be built under the proposed zoning in a vacuum. It's about the difference between what can be built under the proposed zoning and what can be built today. So, it's not all of these students or all of these houses or nothing. It's what can be built today versus what can be built under the proposed zone. And I think people conveniently forget that fact when it suits their argument.
Okay. Christie, and I think then we'll go into a vote after this.
Yeah, just a reminder, through a lot of our departmental discussions with the department heads, housing came up a lot. And I think that whether town employees would benefit from this, it could be an option. And it could, resolve some of that housing woes, especially with the town pondering getting into housing. I don't think that's the best thing to do, but this could be a good option. I don't know yet.
All right, thanks. Yeah. All right, so why don't we come to a vote? The motion is to reconsider the comment that we made. So if a yay, we'll strike this comment that's in the warrant, and we'll be back to square zero. So all is in favor.
I'm sorry. Could you read the comment one more time?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
The comment as written is the Finance Committee does not support the Planning Board motion to adopt this article due to the lack of available information about the fiscal impact on town finances at the time this article was reviewed by the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Okay. So all is in favor. Why don't we just signify by raising their right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because that motion carries. So we are back to square one, back to zero. This comment is struck, and I would entertain ideas for a comment, or our discretion, we can leave it blank. We don't have to do anything. So, Jim.
This is more of a comment.
Sure.
I don't know how to structure it, but I think we owe the town, or the town meeting, some update that said they came to us, they gave us the information, so it doesn't, because they're going to have that, it's going to be in the warrant.
Right.
So whether it's a comment or
Well-
you standing up saying,
Yep.
Richmond has, whatever he calls,
Well-
resolved this question or something.
How about this idea? I mean, I've thought of that, as you mentioned that. If we decide to go with nothing, I'll be prepared to give an update to town meeting when this
Or
article
when they
is.
go, I don't know, but I just, whatever you want.
Answer, we
one way or the
will
other.
certainly have a response.
good.
How about that? Now, that being said, if we feel so inclined to put a comment, we can also do that too. That can be entered at town meeting.
Are you saying a verbal comment? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
that's what I would make. But it would be basically, my verbal comment would be just update what we did without, try to be objective about it, not to be subjective. Jim?
Or you could put a comment and remove it and just say, we got the information we wanted.
That's
and you
it.
can write that.
That's
I mean,
the update.
You know, I don't know.
You said it.
Yeah.
Well, unless someone calls the article, they're not going to, sorry.
No, go ahead. No,
No,
I
unless
heard
someone
everybody.
calls it, we're not going to,
Oh, no. Well, I'm assuming this is going to be called.
okay, all right.
Christie?
I agree with Jim. I think if we have an option right now to put in something pretty basic,
Yeah, we can do it.
to the tune of, just to the tune of what he just said, I think we should do that, and I think you could back it up with
Yeah.
additional.
Well, how about there be something like this? The Finance Committee has received the information that was requested and is satisfied to support the planning board motion going forward at this time.
That's good. I think it's good to have something in print.
That sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then I think then.
I
we're all
second
set.
that.
We'll second that? All right. That's all right. Okay, so we're set. We're all on the same page. I was thinking the same thing. Okay.
We got to vote.
So vote,
So vote, all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Fine.
discussion? No.
No more discussion. No, that would be serious. So, on 53 then. So we're all set. I do want to thank you, Mr. Armanetto. I got your name right. I apologize before. And Ms. Raghaveen for coming in and answering our questions. Best of luck going forward to you. And there's somebody had a hand up, I thought. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It will be. Thank you.
If I could,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just in closing, I do want to echo the sentiment of the committee and of Mr. Kelly in particular. We think this is a very valuable process, and hopefully will set a standard going forward, not just for ourselves, but for other projects and other developments in town, and we're glad to participate in that as we move forward. So thank you for the time and the consideration. I know it was under somewhat of a short time frame, and we know it's a busy time of year for everyone, and we very much appreciate that.
No, I think it was positive all the way around. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item, it's another reconsideration possibility. Discussion of possible reconsideration of Finance Committee motion for Article 75 for the 2015 annual town meeting. This, as you may recall, is a citizens' article for sewer, for parcels to be added into the sewer district. And we had taken a motion not to adopt following the Board of Selectmen in their deliberations. It is in our packet, but it has come to my attention that the board took a vote that put these parcels into the needs area. And what I'd like to do, because I don't want to speak, Kara, would you mind or Mr. Vorse, would you care to comment on this, just give us an update? I think you're much more knowledgeable than I am. I'll speak out of turn. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Kara.
Woodard and Curran made a presentation to the Board of Selectmen last Wednesday, and the thought was that I would get them to give their blessings on moving forward for public presentations of CWMP.
Okay.
The needs areas, which are part of the CWMP, have not officially been adopted. That is part of the CWMP process.
Okay.
And this particular location is included within the needs area for the Maya Comet location. The Maya Comet area is not scheduled to be sewered for 15 or so years, so it would be much further out, obviously much after the formal acceptance of the CWMP in the needs areas. So unless the proponents have a plan to construct the sewer on their own, within that 10-year period, it might be premature at this point to act on it because it's going to be included when the needs areas are formally accepted.
Okay, all right. Greg?
So Carol, while you're there, being included in the needs area, does that negate the need for the checklist now?
The checklist would only be for areas outside of the currently accepted needs areas. So today, right now, it is outside of the currently accepted needs areas. When that moves forward and the CWMP is accepted, it will be within the needs areas.
So just summing up, I'm sure I understand. It's out as of today,
As of today,
but in the future it'll be in.
exactly.
Okay. Stephen?
I'm not familiar with the process of taking a Woodard and Curran report and then incorporating it into the CWMP. So what is the likelihood that this recommendation will not be accepted and these properties won't be included in the needs area?
Very low.
Very low.
The Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan has to be submitted to DEP, and once it's accepted by DEP, which it's in the process of at the moment, there's no foreseeable need for there to be any changes to the recommendations.
Okay.
Cliff, then Christie.
Maybe I'm getting confused. The article wasn't so much to get into the needs area as it was to be put into the sewer district.
Correct.
So it would still just be in the needs area. It still wouldn't be in the sewer district. Is that what I'm...
But the checklist won't apply when it's in the needs area.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Christie?
The term needs area sounds a little more imminent than it does, I guess, because you said that this area is not to be sewered probably for another 15 years?
The capital plan that's generated out of the CWMP is a 20-year construction plan. So while it is in the plan, it's much further out in the progression of years.
So what are the critical needs of this particular area that it's...
It's called a needs area because ultimately, given the age of the septic systems, the size of the lots, the soils and materials that septic systems could be constructed in, and the possibility of failures of septics in these particular areas having some impact on an adjacent water body. The ones that are highest on the needs list are the properties around the Nantucket Harbor, Mattucket Harbor, Long Pond, and Hummock Pond all have MEP studies, marine estuaries plans, that define what the total maximum daily load is. My comment doesn't have that yet, and I'm sure it will, over the years, have that done, and then it may be raised in priority. But at this point, without having that study done, it's towards the bottom of the list.
Okay. Cliff?
Maybe I'm confused on the analogy of sewering the area versus the people who own the property now. If they were put into the sewer district, they would be responsible for all that infrastructure to connect to wherever they had to connect to.
These articles, while they put properties in the sewer district, do not appropriate any funds for any construction. If the town was to do the construction, we would have to go to town meeting for an appropriation. But a homeowner who wanted to construct it on their own could only construct it if it was within the sewer district.
So they'd have to get into the sewer district, and then obviously they'd have to absorb the cost if they wanted to actually connect.
Correct.
Okay.
Did you want to say that?
Yeah, so
No, you heard me.
I think I'm confused.
Okay,
Because we
go.
received a letter from Linda Williams.
Yes, that's part of our
Saying
packet.
that as a result of the Board of Selectmen meeting on Wednesday, March 25th, an affirmative vote was taken to accept the sewer needs areas put forth by the DPW. One of the areas accepted was the Myacomet watershed needs area. My street is clearly included in that needs area now. Am I understanding that's correct?
No, it's not correct.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, they did not formally accept the needs areas. They gave me marching orders to move forward with the harbor and Mattucket. They did not accept the needs areas formally.
Okay. It is confusing.
Yeah.
So I'll sum it up and then we'll go to the comments, is that I've been as chairman, try to be very consistent following the board's lead on these articles. Our motion continues to follow the board's lead at this time.
It does.
That answers my thing. No, it doesn't. All right, further comments? Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee?
Sounds like we didn't need to do anything.
That's right. I agree. Thank you.
Our comment stands.
My comment stands. I think our motion stands. I do sympathize sympathize with the sponsor, but we want to be consistent. Steve, go ahead.
I think maybe I don't understand. So
Okay, let's be sure we do. Go
Yeah.
ahead. That's fine.
I think maybe I'm asking the same question that's just been asked 4 times by 4 different people. When will this area be accepted as a needs area? It's been recommended.
Yeah.
What is the timeline here? I understand there's a 15 or 20-year capital plan, but we're not talking about capital because we're not talking about town funds.
Correct.
So when will this be accepted as a needs area?
DEP has to give their final approval, and then once their approval is given, I have to go to the Board of Selectmen for their official approval.
Okay, so 18 months, 8 months?
I'm hoping that DEP doesn't take much longer than a month or so.
So this will be a needs area in a month?
I give it a couple months.
Okay, so let's follow your train, because I want to be clear. So let's say July 1st, this becomes in the needs area.
Then we were going to make this applicant and everyone else on the street wait an additional 11 months before they can apply to be added to the sewer district?
That's
Is that,
Once the CWMP is accepted by the Board of Selectmen, they don't need to apply. They will be in.
okay. And then the sponsor and these plots can.
Could do the construction on their own.
Okay, so once the board approves them into the needs area, which would be in a few months, then it's good to go. So
It
it's
is.
good news for her.
Yes.
Okay. Does that help? I think it helps me a little bit.
Can I ask?
But
I thought the Board of Selectmen had the ability, once you're in the needs area, to put you in the sewer district. They don't necessarily have to do it.
The needs areas become the sewer districts.
I'm even more confused. All right.
Well, it is confusing. But again, looking at it from our standards, well, at least I'm trying to look at it, is that we're following the lead of the sewer commissioners. They are taking actions that will put this in the needs areas, but it's going to be a few months.
Yes.
And then once it's in, this is almost academic.
It's moot.
Okay, do you see it that way? I'm looking around at everybody. Let me be sure I'm not. Question?
So the sewer district could have a lot of properties that are not hooked up to the sewer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, Steve, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I don't want to stifle any discussion, but maybe we've all asked the same question enough
I think we
times.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, maybe I'm in disagreement with the rest of the committee, but I am making a motion to reconsider our comment here.
Okay, you certainly can do that. Is there a second?
Second.
Can we have a second? All right, and so there's a motion to reconsider, which would mean that we would, if successful, we would be back at square one, so we would strike, move to not to adopt the article, if we vote in favor of this reconsideration. Okay. You want to speak any more on that, since you made the motion, just to help clarify your position? And
Sure.
not to put you on the spot, but...
No, it's appropriate. If it's academic that these properties are going into a needs area, and it's that they have been identified already as being in a needs area, and it's academic that the needs area will be added to the sewer district, and these properties will go into the sewer district and eventually be tied into sewer, I don't see the point in making these people wait another year, or a few months, or whatever it is. I mean, it's going to happen.
I agree.
Great.
And I hope I understood this. That wouldn't happen anyhow, right? If the Board of Selectmen, as the sewer commissioners, adopt this needs area and the district they're already in, they don't have to wait. They can get into the sewer once that decision is made.
That's correct. So that would be a few months when the DEP rules. Looking at the carrot. That is correct.
So this is likely to be accepted by the Board of Selectmen within a couple months. I thought that was when the DEP would issue their report. You're saying yes to both things. Which one?
Oh. No, let's be sure. So let's be sure.
Once DEP accepts the CWMP, then I have to take it to the Board of Selectmen where I anticipate their acceptance. Upon their acceptance, the needs areas in the new CWMP become the sewer district.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we expected, maybe I'm splitting hairs. It's all happening within a couple months.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Joe?
So it gets back to, I don't think we need to do anything,
Right.
because 6 to 12 months from now, as this process that Kara has described unfolds, Mrs. Linda Williams'
And-
property will be included in the sewer district, and if she wants to spend the money and connect herself,
As well as the
or
other
if there are other
lots.
neighbors,
Right.
she can.
Correct.
All right. Okay. Well, we still have a motion to reconsider, unless you want to pull that, We'll move through, which is fine. Either way, it's fine. Let's vote it through. All right. So, lacking any other discussion, a vote on a yes would strike our article, our motion not to adopt, maybe back at square one. A vote no would we would leave the motion as is. Everybody understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. We'll do a show of hands again. All those in favor of reconsidering this article signify by raising their hand. 1, 2, 3. That motion does not carry, so we will stick with our original motion. What we can do, though, is, and I'm more than happy to do this, or sewer commissioner, is to make it clear to town meeting the update on Woodward and Curran's recommendation.
Sure.
Would you mind, Karen? Okay, Kara. Sorry. To do that. Okay. I'm more than happy to do that. Okay. Next item on our agenda is the Finance Subcommittee on Pensions, which is presenting a report this evening to the Board of Selectmen. It is also in your packet of the committee, subcommittee that we formed, made up of Mr. Williams as chairman, Mr. Sperry, and Mr. Grouse, have done, I think, yeoman's work in preparing a preliminary report to the Board of Selectmen. And they modeled their report on another community, Newton, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Williams to chat about that. And again, I want to say thank you for that.
We basically, through a short meeting just before this Finance Committee meeting, we accepted a document, the memorandum, that we are just briefly summarizing the OPEB, the insurance, the other post-employee benefits, which is health insurance for retired employees. And basically, that's the biggest deficit we find that needs to be addressed in the town, even though we've started that process. We owe $88 million, and we have maybe $1 million in the fund. We recognize that the Barnstable retirement is under the process of being fully funded by 2038. So we're going to take this memo to the Board of Selectmen tonight and present it to them, and then see what further duties they give us, or how much more in depth they want us to pursue as far as our mission statement.
And we could also, as this committee, could ask the subcommittee to pursue, too.
Sure.
So, anyway. Okay. So if, did you say anything else?
No.
Okay. Any questions on this? Jim?
Should we endorse this?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, after the
Okay.
questions. I was going to ask for that.
Should we make a motion to
Yeah,
endorse?
make a motion to endorse this preliminary report.
I did.
You did? Okay, we got a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that motion. John?
I'm willing to endorse it, I just haven't read it.
Well, whose fault is that?
Has anybody heard that before?
No.
Well, they read the damn thing.
we got
Pass
For
it,
God's
you'll pass
sakes.
it, and then we'll read it, right, yeah.
Oh,
That sounds like the
no,
Congress.
no, that's your issue.
I
I've
think
read it.
the point I'm making is that this is a group of us, and therefore, I'd be willing to support it simply without reading it, simply because it's one of our group and willing to go forward. I just was
worth
joking
reading.
before.
Joe?
I guess I would just like to add into the record that the subcommittee was fortunate in that, I actually think it was Rick Atherton, who's not here anymore, but Rick was able to get us a copy of the City of Newton pension report, or employee benefit report, that was invaluable. And we were able to get permission from the City of Newton to basically use the report, any parts of it we wanted verbatim.
Great.
So it was a huge step forward in terms of a lot of the boilerplate of definitions of pensions and what OPEB is and who's covered by what. And so as you read through the memo, I'd have to say it's probably 50-odd% in terms of, the boilerplate we were able to use, and then we were able to add in, the statistics for Nantucket's situation in terms of what our unfunded liabilities are for pension and then for OPEB. And, we tried to come to some very basic conclusions for the Board of Selectmen, hopefully to guide whatever they want us to do next.
Okay. Very good. All right, so we have a motion to endorse, and I did hear a second. So all's in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. And again, good job. I think I did not expect this to be done so fast.
Yes.
So I think that, I really, kudos.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I want to
Mr.
commend the group because this has got to
Should
be
be.
the quickest
Yes, it is.
subcommittee report
Ever.
that I have ever seen in seven-plus years. So
That's right. Compared to the one before, which took forever.
Credit to the chairman.
Yeah, right. It's a good thing I didn't do it. God, we just did the first line. Okay. Moving on, discussion of possible technical amendments to warrant articles, and this information was sent out this morning, and it's at the end of our packet. And Brian, I'm going to call on you, or Martin, I don't know if you guys want to discuss it, just to give us an overview. I can go through each one. But how about this? We'll go through each article, and at the end, unless there's questions, we'll take them all as a group to endorse or not to endorse. Does that sound all right to everybody? Sure. Just to move things along. The first is Article 2, unpaid bills, and highlighted in yellow, I'm going to assume that there are 2 extra bills to these vendors. Is that correct? To the Inquirer Mirror and Don Allen from Natural Resources?
Yes, that is correct, actually.
Okay, and it just altered the total from $21,252.61 to $21,401.41.
Yes, that is correct.
Any questions on that? Okay, the next is Article 3, which is a prior year article, and there is one change, and it's from Article 10 of the 2014 Annual Town Meeting, the Children's Beach dredging, and it's changed because it still Article 10 of the 2014 Annual Town Meeting, Children's Beach boat ramp. So, would you want to explain on that one, Mark?
This was a request that came from the police department. This article is not going to be happening. The Children's Beach dredging.
Okay.
So that's why we decided to reappropriate the article. So 150,000 are going to go to the Children's Beach boat ramp, which was an article that was voted in the same town meeting last year.
Okay.
So $150,000 are going there, and $100,000 are going to be used in Article 10 as a funding source as well. And that would close that article.
Okay. Any questions on that? Then moving over to Article 10, basically numbers are the same in essence. Is just the funding sources are different?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And any questions on that? Again, that is a technical thing. Okay. Hearing none. Now, you have Article 12 here. Is there anything on Article 12? I didn't see it. There is. Okay. Thanks, Brian.
We need to make a small change by striking out exclusively only Section 21 of MGL 44, Section 7, because
okay.
Putting exclusively 21 in there would actually not allow for construction. It would only allow for planning and design, which I don't think is what the intent is. So,
a lot of design. So it should be Section 7.
It should just say Chapter 44, Section 7, which is all of the long list, which does allow for construction. So that's the only change there.
I guess we shouldn't reconsider the appropriation, should we?
No.
You got my head. All right. Jim, yes.
I have a question on this article.
On 12?
I'll try to word it, yeah.
Okay.
So this includes the results of the action taken in executive session?
Yes.
To change the amount?
Yes.
And I didn't know if it was because that's, possibly a question people at town meeting will have in terms of why.
I'll be prepared to answer that. The school will.
Okay. So, and I don't know if we need to put that in a comment, or I don't know, but I just think it's
we certainly
school
could
kind of be have the burden of people questioning that. And
well, they may. If the pleasure of the committee is to put in a comment, that's fine. My feeling was that it's it's the number is what it is.
Right.
If someone asks about that, I would give a little history of how we came up with that from executive session, because the records are released.
So, okay, can we speak about what happened in the executive session yet, or not?
I think everything's released, Jim. You approve it? Kevin? I'll look at this to be sure.
My belief is you have to go into an executive session again to approve the minutes, so then they become public minutes.
Oh, we haven't done that. We haven't done that?
You haven't done that, no.
Shoot, it's not on the agenda.
So we can do, if you want, I can add it to the agenda tomorrow.
Add it to the agenda for Monday. Oh, for Monday. Yeah, for Monday. I'm not going to do it tomorrow.
So that's even raises.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I have even more concern now, because, I just, in terms of what people,
well, no, okay.
The minutes would have resolved some of those questions.
What we'll do is we'll approve the minutes on Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll be prepared if somebody has a question.
Okay.
Is that we can take if you want to write a comment, we can have that, and I'll be prepared to sell that comment.
I just think it's.
Well, how about this? Leave it at this. Let's approve the minutes on Monday.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll put that on the agenda. Right. And after that, if there's a question, I'll be prepared to speak on it.
Yeah. Whatever the group thinks.
Does that?
Yeah.
Is that all right with everybody?
Sure.
Okay. And then specifically, someone asked about the land acquisition. I'll just give a history of what we did and to add to the total. So just the facts. Okay. All right. Article 34, and this is on the Community Preservation Committee fiscal year 2016 budget transfer. There's a correction in the motion, and Brian, it's just an addition there.
No, it's a subtraction. There is actually less funds available in that article, so we're reducing it by $8,000.
Okay. Right.
So, and that changes the subtotal.
Total.
And then again, so that's,
And then in Article 35, there's a typo. The old goal should be the old jail, it's a GAOL. And our moderator picked that up. And then moving along to Article 70, it's a zoning map change. It's just the, what's highlighted has been corrected, I'm going to assume.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, yeah. And then moving on, and then down to Article 102, what's highlighted is also corrections, and there's just technical wording.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions on either of those? All right. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion for approval on all.
There is an Article 103 as well on the
back,
just making you aware, yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was 102. Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself because of Article 70.
Okay. That's fine. On 103, so it's the same thing. It's, changes and to make sure everything is by the law. So,
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt, and is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Okay, great. This is going to wrap things up. Thank you very much. The next meeting is tomorrow is a moderators meeting at 2 o'clock here. Just to let you know, I will not be here tomorrow. I have to go out of town. So our next meeting will be on April 6th. The two agenda items already are a reconsideration of Article 105 and minutes on the executive session from March 5th, I believe the date is. Okay, and there may be some other corrections. So we'll be meeting at 5:30 at where we usually do at our table, town meeting. Okay, questions on that? Okay. All right. Well, very good. Thank you. Hope everyone's prepared for Monday night.
And Tuesday.
And Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Motion. Well, we'll go with that. We'll try. Thank you, Kara. Okay. So a motion to adjourn?
Yep. So moved.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody have a good evening. Good weekend. All right. All right. Thanks.
Non-controversial. ATM is now becoming a controversial one somehow?
Oh, I know. It's going really far. Is it going to be? Yeah. So, well, it could go fast, but yeah, that's why I was looking at this. We need to know. There is something.
So it could go for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights?
No, I ordered one myself.
here.
Oh, really? Well, you know what? I keep getting emails. It's just my email crap now. Well, they were here. Okay. All right. I'll be going.
Why is that?
Which is important. You heard about it?
What's wrong with the thing?
Yeah, what's wrong with the thing? Where are they? I don't see anybody here.
And you were sitting right there.
Oh, that's all right. It's just
So the agenda. All right.
I saw the tape.
Just text me. And you need to call me. That's fine. He's not going to do it, unfortunately. So. All right. Good.
To me, and I, yeah, well, right. You know, I thought the Richmond report was fine. It was biased in their favor, which I would expect it to be. I found David Ward's report to be sort of like the counter position also biased. You know, all of his negatives. I thought he like kind of had them all